Hi, everybody. I'm Marcus Bolt from England, Subud member in the Lewis Group. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about the ZoomMUSE I'll be doing on April the 12th, that's Monday, on the work of Riduan Tomkins, a Subud painter who died in 2009. There's a picture of Riduan in his heyday. Now, although I had known Riduan for over 40 years, he always seemed to be somehow popping up at Subud events worldwide with a funny story and a charming smile. It was the year we spent working alongside each other in neighboring studios, which stands strongest in my mind. Now, Riduan lived many lives, a very private, almost secret person, a Subud member and dedicated helper, devoted Muslim, art school lecturer, professional painter, and relentless hustler. He'd paint all morning and hustle galleries and colleges all afternoon. And that's just to name but a few of his roles. And although these various lives inevitably overlapped, on the whole, he kept them strictly segregated. Now, Riduan was irascible, manipulative, but great fun and very kind. And although he'd never exhibit with other Subud artists, he was very generous with his time and advice to aspiring painters. Now, Riduan studied at a local art school and then gained a place at the Royal College of Art. And I do believe these are the paintings that he showed at interview that got him in, because places at the Royal College of Art are really coveted and they only take the very best potentials. Now you can already see, as you will see later in some of the illustrations, the beginnings of Riduan's way of working, of drawing. Most importantly, he always painted figures in space, and this is the beginnings really of that. Now, back in 2010, a Subud member from Holland asked if I'd like to work with her to produce a book about Riduan's life and work. Now, I found there was a smattering of Riduan's work on the internet, but little written about him, apart from the obituaries. And yet he was an internationally known artist. Eventually, the lady had to pull out, so having little time to spare, I couldn't put in the work required for the research, contacting ex-colleagues, curators worldwide, and his family. And we'll move on. These are very early works of Riduan's, probably around about late 60s. It's very difficult to date them. Because I remember asking Riduan once why he didn't photograph and keep a catalogue of all his work, which I do avidly. Riduan replied, "That's a job for my biographers, not me." And he always used this camp voice. He kept it for put downs and relating funny stories. And as I said, I do believe Riduan was a major painter, and I know he influenced many of his students when he taught in England, Canada, New Zealand, and latterly Indonesia, where he died. So these are very early pieces, late 60s, and already you begin to see Riduan's style of drawing coming here, and this linear thing, this figure set in space, and the echoing of these shapes. It's very much Riduan, as we will see later. This is another very early piece. Again, you're beginning to see Riduan's style developing. Now, most contemporary painters owe something to the two giants of the, oh, sorry, no, first of all, I'm going to show you these two, beg your pardon. This is very typical of Riduan's style. These are probably 90s, something like that. And again, figures in relationship, in space. And again, these are two typical pieces. I'll come back to these in a while. Yeah, but first, as I said, most contemporary painters owe something to the two giants of the 20th century, Matisse and Picasso. Riduan was a Matisse man through and through, seeing himself as a painter of the French school, for which, according to Riduan, elegant line, controlled brushwork, rich but subtle color and texture were the hallmarks. His other great influence was the American painter Diebenkorn. This is the Diebenkorn, that's a Matisse. Who was in turn inspired by Matisse's interiors with figures, which Matisse painted around 1910, something like that. And I'll go on to what they have in common in a minute. The key to understanding their work is to accept that the gestural marks of the painting are as important as those immediately under the surface and appearing faintly through the layers. This is because every mark narrates the process of the work, showing where the artist has been, how he has struggled and explored. Now, interestingly, Riduan always painted in series. Here's a couple of examples again. Often working on 3 thematized canvases at the same time, each one forming the others, as he eloquently put it. So although Riduan addressed all these formally painterly concerns, his work also blurs the boundaries between abstraction and the figurative narrative, but always with sophistication, grace, and wit. Now I'll show you some more of Riduan's paintings. These, I think, were done in 2000 onwards. There's quite a few paintings like this using spirals and figures in space. They later became sort of acrobatic angels flying. Here's another one, spiral. I think this one was painted in Indonesia, as far as I can tell. As I said, there's not a lot of work available online, and Riduan never used a computer in his life, so he certainly wouldn't have put them there. There's another a little bit out of focus, I'm afraid, but that's the kind of elegance of a Riduan figure standing in space. This one too, I think, was done in Indonesia. And there are quite a few, which I'll show at the on the ZoomMUSE, of these paintings with trees, these stylized trees, as stylized as the figures. But again, you can really see that Diebenkorn Matisse link up. I'll go back to these. And you can see there were his influences. And I'll go back again. And again, there's this rich texture, rich color, and these beautiful lines. The last thing I'm going to talk about, oh, here's some more, sorry, yeah. Here you can see where this overpainting, again, texture. Riduan was very proud of his brushwork. And it was extraordinary to watch him painting, scumbling, hatching, brush moving all the time, but very controlled. These are, again, later pieces. He often did pieces of people on magic carpets or just holding an umbrella or juggling. And I hope to have examples of those later. One last thing I want to say is about Riduan's techniques. Hospital corners, he would declare, as he deftly and neatly prepared his canvases, attaching untreated cotton duck over a stretcher, gripping and stapling until it was tight as a drum. Then he would make a simple linear charcoal drawing, usually an elegant figure or couple on a ground with a horizon line, the figures in relationship, engaged in simple acts such as standing, juggling, tightrope walking, holding an umbrella, and later looping aerobatic angels. Then came the first of the coats of evil-smelling sighs, which he boiled up in the kitchen at Loudwater annoying a lot of members if he did it before they arrived for Latihan. Then came the first, when dry, the drawing would be further refined before another coat. And after, he would start applying coats of gesso, the white ground, each layer demanding the drawing be restated and refined. And it was only then, the next day, when all was dry, that he would actually begin to paint. Also continuing to modify and change, but as I said, often leaving the marks of his journey, where he'd been, as you can see here, you know, these. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. So I hope you will join us on April the 12th, when I'll give a fuller presentation on Riduan's work and show a lot more of his paintings. So I'm hoping you can join us. Goodbye.